Today, we're diving into the body's ultimate balancing act, something absolutely incredible that's happening inside you right this very second.
So, what is this magic trick I'm talking about? Well, it's a feat of biological engineering that honestly is the only thing keeping you alive day to day.
Okay, get this. You've got about 1.5 gallons of blood, right? It has to stay perfectly liquid, flowing through literally thousands of miles of blood vessels. But the second you get a cut, a tiny scrape, anything, the system has to, boom, create a solid plug, instantly, and only at that exact spot. It's this incredible tightrope walk. Too little clotting, and you bleed out. Too much clotting, and you get a deadly blockage. That is the magic trick we're talking about.
All right, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at what's called the bleeding paradox. Then, we'll dive into your body's amazing emergency plan. After that, we'll touch on what happens when things are off from the start, a factor of family, you could say. Then we'll see what happens when the whole system just goes into chaos. And finally, we'll look at how doctors play detective and read the red flags.
Okay, first things first. This whole magic trick, it has a name, and that name is hemostasis.
So, hemostasis, that's the fancy official term for this constant balancing act. It's really the whole collection of processes that keep your blood flowing smoothly, but are also ready to, spring into action and form a super fast, localized plug right where you need it, and nowhere else. It's not just one thing, it's a whole system, and it has to work in perfect harmony.
So, what happens when that alarm bell goes off? You get a cut. What's the protocol? Well, your body has this brilliant, almost military-grade 3-step emergency plan. And honestly, this process makes so much sense. Step 1, the squeeze. The blood vessel itself literally squeezes shut. That's called vascular constriction. It's just like pinching a leaky garden hose to slow the flow. Then comes step 2, the patch. These tiny little things called platelets rush to the scene and basically form a temporary plug. But, this patch is kind of flimsy. So that brings us to the crucial step 3, the seal. The body kicks off this incredible chain reaction of proteins to weave a super strong mesh called fibrin. This fibrin is like rebar, reinforcing that platelet patch and turning it into a tough, durable clot. So remember that. Squeeze, patch, seal. That's the emergency plan.
But what if the blueprint for that emergency plan is flawed from the get-go? What if you're born with a faulty instruction manual? Well, that's where we get into inherited bleeding disorders. Yeah, and the one most people have heard of is hemophilia. Now, this is what's called an X-linked genetic disorder. The faulty gene is on the X chromosome, and because guys only have one X chromosome, they're the ones who are primarily affected. So to put it simply, people with hemophilia are missing a key ingredient, a specific protein they need for step 3, the seal. See, their body can do the squeeze, and it can make the initial patch, but it just can't create that strong fibrin seal to make the clot hold. And it gets a little more specific. There are actually 2 main types. You've got hemophilia A, which is when you're missing a protein called factor 8. That's the most common one. Then there's hemophilia B, which is a deficiency of factor 9. But here's the really interesting part. Even though it's a completely different missing piece of the puzzle, the end result, the symptoms, they are clinically identical. Uncontrolled bleeding, especially into joints and muscles. You absolutely cannot tell them apart just by looking at a patient.
So how bad is it? Well, it all comes down to the numbers. The severity is all based on how much of that active clotting factor a person actually has. If you have less than 1% of the normal amount, that's severe. We're talking dangerous spontaneous bleeding. But if you have, say, between 5 and 40%, it's considered mild. You might not even know you have it until a major surgery or a serious injury.
Okay, now let's talk about the actual most common inherited bleeding disorder, and it's one a lot of people haven't even heard of, von Willebrand disease. And right off the bat, a huge difference from hemophilia. It affects men and women equally. The problem here is with a completely different protein, something called von Willebrand factor. And this is what's so wild about this one. This von Willebrand factor, or VWF for short, is a serious multitasker. It has 2 critical jobs. Job 1, it's like superglue for platelets, helping them stick to the blood vessel wall during step 2, the patch. Job 2, it acts like a personal bodyguard for factor 8. Yep, the exact same factor that's missing in hemophilia A. It protects it while it's floating around in the blood. So you see the problem, right? If your VWF is messed up, you can have problems with both the patch and the seal. It's a real double whammy. All right, so far we've talked about inherited problems. But sometimes the system doesn't start out broken. Sometimes it goes completely catastrophically rogue during a person's life.
And that's when you get clotting and chaos. And one of the most frightening examples of this is a condition called disseminated intravascular coagulation, or just DIC. This can be triggered by some really serious stuff, like a massive infection or major trauma. And what happens is the clotting system just gets switched on everywhere, all at once. The body starts forming thousands of tiny, useless clots all throughout the smallest blood vessels.
Think about it like this. Imagine trying to put out thousands of tiny little fires all over a city at the same time. You'd use up all your water. You'd use up all your firefighters. You'd run out of everything fast. Well, that's exactly what happens in DIC. This insane system-wide clotting just burns through all the available platelets and all the clotting factors. The body's entire emergency response system is just gone, depleted.
And this is what makes it so deadly. It creates this horrible paradox. The person is forming all these tiny clots that are blocking blood flow to their vital organs, but at the exact same time, because there are no platelets or factors left, they're bleeding uncontrollably. From IV sites, from old wounds, anywhere. You're clotting and bleeding to death at the same time. It's a 5-alarm medical emergency.
Okay, a different kind of chaos is something called ITP. And yeah, good luck saying the full name. Immune thrombocytopenic purpura. This is an autoimmune disorder, which basically means the body is attacking itself. The immune system gets confused and starts making antibodies that see its own platelets as the enemy. It's like a case of mistaken identity. These antibodies tag the platelets for destruction, so they get wiped out way too fast. This means step 2, the patch, is in big trouble, because you've basically got no supplies.
So, okay, we've seen a bunch of ways the system can fail, right? So how on earth do doctors figure out what's going on? Well, they basically have to become detectives, and their clues are hidden in the lab work.
Of course, it all starts with talking to the patient and a physical exam. But the real detective work comes down to a few key blood tests. First, a simple platelet count. That tells you how many workers you have for step 2, the patch. Then you've got 2 critical tests, the PT and the APT. You can think of these like stopwatch tests. They literally time how long it takes for the blood to clot in a test tube, and they each test a slightly different team of proteins that are in charge of step 3, the seal.
And this is where the clues all come together. It's like a diagnostic cheat sheet. Just look at the patterns. For hemophilia, the platelet count is totally normal, but the APTT stopwatch is running really slow. That points the finger right at a problem with the seal, specifically with factors 8 or 9. Now look at ITP. The platelet count is super low, but the clotting times, they're normal. That tells you the problem isn't the seal, it's the patch. And then, DIC. Just look. Everything is haywire. Low platelets, both stopwatches running slow. It's the signature of that total system meltdown we were just talking about.
And that's the crucial takeaway here. These lab tests, they're not just random numbers on a page. They are a pattern. They are clues. And by analyzing that pattern, doctors can create a roadmap to the problem and figure out exactly where the squeeze patch seal emergency plan is failing. It's just an absolutely incredible system, isn't it? This delicate life-or-death balancing act is happening inside you every single second of your life. And it really makes you stop and wonder. What other invisible, complex systems are working perfectly right now to protect you in ways you don't even realize?